decades in the making.
She had recently come over to Bloomington to reconnect with her biological daughter.
She wanted answers that all adopted kids have, where you came from, and why they gave you up, or why you were taken away.
But their reconciliation is shattered by a grisly crime.
I would like to report a possible dead body found out by the Maple Grove Nature Preserve.
Obvious chest and neck trauma appear to have been stabbed and possibly throat sliced.
The search for answers draws detectives down a dark path.
She would disappear so she could go out drinking, drugging. We secured search warrants to go search the hotel rooms.
We were able to locate a lot of personal items that appeared to have been packed quickly.
To be able to tell them things about what happened in the forest that night that really only the killer would know.
This whole thing, it was heartbreaking.
She didn't deserve to have happened to her what happened.
July 2nd, 2017, Bloomington, Illinois. A beautiful summer evening brings flocks of locals to Funk's Grove Nature Preserve.
Funk's Grove is known as an area where families go spend some time in nature. Also a lot of hikers, because the nature trail has a lot of wildflowers and so forth.
Just after 6 p.m., a couple hiking the nature trails spots something unusual.
They observed an object laying in the weeds. The object was red. Initially, they thought it was a cooler or something. As they approached, they observed the face and skin exposed and determined it to be a person. They began calling out to the body, and there was no response. So they continued to get closer and finally observed that there was blood on the chest and torso of the body laying in the weeds.
The hikers immediately call 911.
What's your emergency? Yeah, I would like to report a possible dead body found out by the Maple Grove Nature Preserve. It looks like a female with perfect blood all over her chest.
Within minutes, officers from the McLean County Sheriff's Office are dispatched to the scene.
It definitely came as a surprise, the location to me. Funk's Grove is a highly trafficked, highly public, very desirable area for people to go to. So we were incredibly concerned as to what happened.
On my arrival, I observed a approximately 40 to 50-year-old female, had obvious chest and neck trauma. It appeared to be a victim of homicide.
There was no possible way that an individual could have inflicted this much damage to themselves. There was definitely a lot of things that was running through my head.
One thing authorities do feel confident about, the woman hasn't been here for long.
In early July, a body will start to decompose quickly, and it was obvious from seeing the body that it had not been there more than a day.
There wasn't much blood underneath the body. The blood at this point had soaked into the dirt. So that was the concern, whether the person was murdered there or whether the person was dumped there.
There was no items in the victim's pockets. There was no purses or wallets anywhere around that was located. So the only thing that we had to identify this individual with was a necklace that she was still wearing and a tattoo on her left forearm that read Leo's Lady. In order to process the scene, we conducted a search of the area.
I noticed that the grass had been disturbed, like something had been drugged through it. Led me to believe that the body had been drugged from the parking lot to that location.
In the parking area, we located several cigarette butts, and a lighter.
When the rest of the search fails to yield more evidence, investigators know this could be their only clue to a possible suspect.
We were unable to locate any weapons on scene, or anything that had blood or any other type of biological evidence on it. So yeah, one of the cigarette butts we sent for DNA testing.
It could take up to 8 weeks to get DNA results, and investigators need something to run with now.
There are a lot of really big questions about who was this woman? Why was she in the middle of the forest? And, who killed her?
The weekend was busy at the park. Anybody could have been a suspect.
There's always an urgency when you have a homicide. homicide to start collecting facts and getting the victim identified. And we know that the longer we go without identifying the victim, the more chance there is that we're losing evidence.
Hoping to obtain more details, Detective Fritz meets with the hikers who discovered the Jane Doe.
The hikers were very distraught and fully not expecting to see a deceased body on their hike, and they were upset during their interview when speaking with me. The hikers had been there only about an hour.
With the couple unable to provide additional context, detectives are perplexed as to why the killer dumped the body here.
This is one of the more commonly traveled foresty areas in this area. I mean, if you were going to dump a body, why would you put it next to a walking trail at a nature center that people walk through the forest?
So the access to this area could be by a lot of people traveling down the interstate.
With easy access to an escape route, investigators know the killer could be anywhere by now.
The body had been there for probably 13 hours or so. I thought about any possible combination of who this person was, how this person ended up there.
As the Jane Doe is carted off to the county coroner, detectives attempt to identify her through their own resources.
When a person is found deceased and we have no identification for them, the initial thing is to look through local databases to find out if anybody's missing. There was no missing persons reported. This person was not in our local database. There was a sense of urgency to figure out who the person was.
We began to canvass the area, search for any surveillance videos that might exist at any of the local businesses, any local residences. Unfortunately, we were unable to come up with anything.
At this point, we needed to complete an autopsy and determine cause of death.
The following morning, an autopsy is performed at the McLean County Coroner's Office.
The autopsy revealed dozens of stab wounds to the chest and neck area.
The victim died from not only multiple stab wounds, but also strangulation, and there was also a laceration on the back of the victim's head from a blunt object.
Generally speaking, when a person is stabbed multiple times, plus strangulation, plus blunt force trauma, this leads to a crime of passion. So at that point, you start thinking that it was somebody closer that had feelings for the victim.
With no time to waste, Sheriff Sandage decides it's time to call on the public for help.
I sent an investigator to that autopsy to take a photograph of the tattoo. We then pushed a picture of that tattoo and also a picture of some jewelry that the victim was wearing out on social media and through the newspaper, hoping somebody would recognize that and would help us identify the body.
Coming up, detectives get their first big break.
A patrol sergeant stated they had received a call from somebody saying that they know who this person is.
When you receive that information, you realize that your suspect pool has just grown exponentially.
July side of Bloomington, Illinois, county investigators hope their limited initial clues will help identify the victim.
They knew that they had a woman, a female, slight build, only about 5 feet tall, roughly her age, maybe 40s. She also had a tattoo on her arm that said Leo's Lady.
We did open up a tip line to the public to contact our agency if they had any information that could help with the assistance of identifying our victim.
Hours after releasing a photograph of the victim's tattoo to local media outlets, detectives finally get a tip they can run with.
On the evening of July 3rd, at about 7:30 p.m., I received a phone call from a patrol sergeant who stated they had made contact with an individual that was indicating they were a family member of our victim. This was really the first time that we had received a call from somebody saying that they know who this person is.
Detectives ask the caller, Terry Gruber, and his wife Sharon to come to the station for questioning.
Terry was watching the evening news, and he observed the tattoo of Leo's lady, and immediately he knew that it was his daughter, Teresa Pullman.
Teresa Ann Gruber was born to Terry and his first wife, Paulette, on November 19th, 1969, in Morton, Illinois.
Her dad, Jerry, left her mom, went off to California to be a rough and tough biker.
Teresa lived with Paulette and her sister Elizabeth when she was 10, and I guess Elizabeth would have been 13 years old. They ended up moving with their mother down to Texas.
Teresa's childhood was chaotic, to say the least. I don't believe she was showed the love someone as a child needs to feel.
By the time she was 12, Paulette would take her to the bar with her so other guys would buy them drinks. Her mom was doing cocaine with her.
Not even a teenager, Teresa already knew this was no life for her and decided to leave home.
She hitchhiked to California with some kid that she was dating at the time, and the gentleman she was traveling across country with parted ways. And at a very young age, she found herself on the street alone.
Desperate for a place to belong, throughout her teens, Teresa threw herself into one failed relationship after the other. She eventually returned to Texas, where she moved back in with her mom. At the age of 25, Teresa learned she was expecting her first child.
The father was a maintenance man at one of the apartment buildings she lived at with her mother.
On February, but the joys of motherhood were overshadowed by other problems.
She was diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. It took years to find that out. Her bipolar disorder and her self-medicating took over her life. At first it was self-medication to cope with the bipolar, and then it spiraled into more of an addiction. And once it started, it snowballed.
Teresa realized that something had to give. She moved to Illinois, where she called on extended family for help raising Christine.
Chrissy was abused as a child by her birth mother's boyfriend. She went in and out of her birth mother's life for the first 2.5 years of her life, and that's when she was abused. When Chrissy was 2.5 years old, she went and lived with her grandma. When she turned 3, she was adopted by Tammy and Kim Riggenbach. They were extended family of Chrissy's, and so therefore they chose to adopt her. The Riggenbachs are church-going people. She had siblings, she had brothers and sisters. Chrissy just had a normal, typical, small-town childhood.
Teresa, for her part, stayed out of the way.
She accepted the fact that she had been taken away and adopted out, and her adopted parents didn't want her to have any contact.
Teresa continued to struggle with addiction, but in 2003, a ray of light came into her life.
I was introduced to Teresa through her sister, and Teresa and I hit it off pretty well. Things progressed rather quickly into a romantic relationship between her and I, which flourished over a 2 or 3 month period.
The couple soon had a son named Ryan.
I think that was one of the major factors that made Teresa want to change as a person and be a better mom, and turned her into a better mom for Ryan. She was a really good mom to Ryan.
Teresa tried to make the most of her second chance in life.
I think that was some of the most joyous occasions that I've ever seen in Teresa, was when we were together with Ryan and just being a family, and everything was going well.
Despite her happy exterior, Teresa continued fighting her own inner demons.
She would get depressed and she would lash out at others. She would get drunk and leave. And a couple days later, I'd get a phone call she'd want to come back home. And that worked for a while, but it didn't work forever.
In 2008, after 5 years together, Teresa and Joel parted ways.
Even though our relationship didn't work out between Teresa and I never wanted to take that relationship away from her and Ryan.
Over the next few years, Teresa continued to struggle for stability in her life. And it was a whirlwind road.
She moved in with me at the end of January in 2009. Teresa and I were both living with my folks. We got our own place on August 1st of 2009. She told me that she'd feel more stable and feel more like I was serious about her if we got married. So Teresa and I got married on August 21st of 2009.
Unfortunately, Teresa's old habits soon caused problems in the relationship.
She kept running off, and I kept taking her back. It ripped my heart out every time she left. We were only married just a touch over a year. We got divorced, I believe it was September 10th in 2010.
Through all of the ups and downs, her daughter Christine was never far from Teresa's mind.
She always said that Chrissy would never forget her. When Chrissy got older, they would get back in contact with each other.
Growing up in Bloomington, Illinois, Christine knew very little about her early years with Teresa. That is, until she got to high school.
In high school, I believe she was a sophomore, Chrissy was told by a family member about the abuse that had happened to her when she was a baby. At that point, there really was a difference in Chrissy. She changed. She started to have behavioral problems. She got involved in drugs and alcohol.
At the age of 16, Christine dropped out of school.
She came to live with me because she was doing drugs and alcohol. She had a rocky relationship with her adopted parents at that time, and then she found out she was pregnant. It was heartbreaking to see Chrissy make bad choices, but they were the same choices that her birth mother made.
Suddenly facing life as a young mother, Christine longed to connect with the one person she knew could relate, her birth mother, Teresa.
Chrissy got in touch with her mom when she turned 18. Chrissy wanted answers that all adopted kids have, where you came from, and who those people were, and why they gave you up, or why you were taken away. She wanted to know the truth from her birth mom herself.
But any hopes of trying to rebuild their relationship vanish in the summer of 2017 when Teresa is found murdered. Now, detectives are gathering information from Teresa's father, Terry, and stepmother, Sharon.
The family did not report Teresa missing because they had talked to her just recently, and it told them she did plan to go to Bloomington to attempt to have a reunion with Chrissy.
Over to our area that might be important to me, Sharon advised me that she had recently gotten into an argument with her boyfriend that she lives with. His name was Leo.
Teresa didn't know Leo that well after she moved in with him. They had barely been dating, and she just made the comment one day that she wasn't happy and she was looking for another place to go.
That was another reason why she had decided to come over to Bloomington. Teresa had left Leo's house and gone to a hotel with Christine. She was staying in the Days Inn in Bloomington. Given the likelihood that it was somebody that did have an emotional connection with Teresa, my first thought was, well, we need to speak with Leo.
Coming up, detectives learn of a toxic pattern.
In the several months leading up to this time, there were incidents in which she had basically just disappeared for several days at a time.
And surveillance footage reveals a new suspect.
We observed an unknown male.
They had dropped her off at a residence in Hayworth, and that was the last time they'd seen her.
July 4th, 2017. Family members of murder victim Teresa Palman mentioned a recent conflict with her boyfriend, Leo Shook.
Teresa's father, Terry, was able to provide us information that Teresa was in a live-in dating relationship with Leo.
After getting contact information from Terry, investigators track Leo down for questioning.
Leo agreed to immediately come over to the sheriff's office. During Leo's interview, he didn't shy away from the fact that he and Teresa had recently been involved in an argument, which resulted in her leaving his residence.
In fact, Leo admits this wasn't the first time that Teresa had skipped town.
Several months leading up to this time, there were approximately 5 incidents in which she had basically just disappeared for several days at a time while living with him.
Teresa would disappear so she could go out drinking, drugging. The drugs and drinking became too important to her, to Teresa. to really care about anything or anybody else.
The more detectives hear from Leo, the less they believe he could have anything to do with Teresa's death.
Leo showed a lot of emotion when you would expect it from somebody that just lost somebody that was close to him. He cooperated with his vehicle, and he provided us with the consent to do that without hesitation. Ultimately, we were able to corroborate his statements with the data that was retrieved from his cellular phone.
With no further reason to hold him, investigators send Leo on his way and focus on piecing together Teresa's last few days.
We were able to narrow down that Teresa, the last couple days that she was alive, she was staying in a hotel in Bloomington.
We determined that there was an active room for Teresa at the Days Inn, and there was also a room that was registered to Chrissy.
We secured search warrants to go search the hotel rooms, see if you could find any evidence of, possibly her death, possibly anybody else that had been around her.
Chrissy's rooms had been checked out of and cleaned prior to us executing our search warrants, and we were unable to locate any obvious items of evidence at that room.
But Teresa's room is a different story.
We were able to locate a lot of personal effects, and the hotel had no record of her checking out, so it was still an active rental. So we knew at that point that it was likely that this was her last known whereabouts prior to when she was murdered.
Officers find evidence to suggest Teresa had been unable to overcome her battle with addiction.
There was items collected that were indicative of heroin usage at her room. Anytime that drugs are involved with a death, whether it be directly related or indirectly related, you always have to consider the idea that it could have had something to do with a drug deal that had gone bad.
When you receive that information, you realize that your suspect pool has just grown exponentially.
To help narrow down their list of suspects, investigators want to speak to Teresa's daughter, Christine Rausch. But where she is now is anyone's guess.
As far as what we've learned, Christina Rausch was the last known person that probably saw Teresa Pullman alive. Chrissy had already checked out of her room. We were still unsure of her whereabouts. Speaking with her was the primary focus at that point. But with all the phone numbers that we were given by Sharon and Terry and Leo to communicate with Chrissy, we were unable to reach her.
Investigators are forced to try a different approach.
I went to Days Inn to obtain surveillance video and spend most of the day reviewing video from people exiting rooms, people going to each other's rooms.
The footage reveals something of interest.
See Teresa walking around the halls of the hotel at 11:15 a.m. on July 1st, and that's the first time we kind of see her moving around that day. And at that point, Teresa was wearing the clothes that she was found deceased in.
As he scrubs through more footage from that day, Detective Beverlin observes Teresa and Christine come and go from the hotel. But it's the company they receive later that night that's most intriguing.
In the evening of July 1st, we observed an unknown male meet with Chrissy while watching the surveillance video. He entered a hotel room. We were able to obtain the hotel room number, and we checked with the hotel manager, and they identified the person as Matt Isbell.
But as Matt continues to appear on the video late into the night, detectives soon notice a chilling detail.
In the early morning hours of July 2nd, there is footage of Teresa, Chrissy, and Matt leaving the area of the hotel where they were all staying together, three of them.
They had left the hotel at approximately 2:15 in the morning, and Matt and Chrissy were the only ones that returned at approximately 4:03 in the morning.
Teresa is not there. And so that's going to be something they have to explain.
Before they have time to track down their new potential suspect, detectives get another promising lead.
I received a phone call from a sergeant on our patrol division. He had just received a call from Chrissy letting him know where she was at and how to contact her because she suspected that she might need to speak with somebody regarding Teresa's murder.
On July 5th, 3 days after Teresa's body was found, detectives bring Christine to the sheriff's office for a formal interview.
When Chrissy was picked up and asked to come in for an interview, she very much acted like a grieving family member, very upset, crying a lot.
I asked her to explain to me what had led up to the time where she left Teresa.
Chrissy starts off by telling detectives what they already know.
Chrissy told me that her mom recently came over to the Bloomington area following an argument that she had had with her boyfriend Leo, and Chrissy met up with her whenever she arrived over here.
But when talk turns to their mother-daughter reunion, Chrissy insists that was never the draw.
Chrissy and Teresa had a rocky road, to say the least. Chrissy had, just within the last few years, started to reconnect with Teresa.
Chrissy says her first attempt at each other since Chrissy was a child, the reunion was anything but heartwarming.
They met at a restaurant. Teresa told her, once they got back in contact, that she hated her and she never wanted her. And there was a physical altercation where Chrissy's birth mom attacked her physically.
Teresa was arrested for assault and spent the next 2 years in prison. Chrissy says after her mother's release, they reconnected again.
They'd go through phases of being able to get along and then not being able to get along and not speaking for a while.
Detectives then ask Chrissy about Matt Isbell, the young man spotted with her and Teresa on the hotel surveillance footage.
She let us know that Matthew Isbell was also with her that night. From what we were able to gather, he is just a longtime friend of Chrissy's.
Chrissy explains that on July 1st, she invited Matt to come hang out at the hotel. But investigators are more interested in the time they spent away from the hotel.
Chrissy had given information that they had dropped Teresa off at a residence in Hayworth. That was the last time they had seen her. Hayworth being less than 10 miles from the location where the body was found.
Coming up, detectives are hit with a startling confession.
During the interview, he changed the story.
Detective Fritz exited the interview room and approached me and the rest of the investigative team with kind of a blank look on his face.
After speaking with Christine Rausch about the last time she'd seen her biological mother, Teresa Palman, McLean County Sheriff's detectives worked to confirm her story.
She had given us a lot of vague information about where Teresa was dropped off at. It became important for us at that point to make contact with Matt Isbell and see if he could provide us with a little bit more insight as to what took place on the evening of July 1st.
But detectives are unable to reach Matt on the cell phone number Chrissy provided.
During Chrissy's interview, she also let me know where he was working at, and I searched the white pages, found the phone number for that location, and made contact with Matt at his place of employment.
As talk turns to the night of July 1st, Matt doesn't offer much more insight than Christine.
Matt was very vague with his response, indicated that he was tired that night and couldn't recall a lot of the details or what had Teresa off to a rural location where she was supposed to be meeting somebody, and they didn't need to wait for her, so they left and went back to the hotel without Teresa. Now, I let him know that I needed him to come to the sheriff's office to speak with me in person. I thought that we might be able to extract a little bit more information from him if I sat down with him and talked to him about specifics.
On July 7th, 2017, detectives bring both Matt Isbell and Christine Rausch in for questioning.
I explained to Chrissy that, we did execute search warrants on her hotel rooms and asked her if she is concerned that we might have located any type of evidence that would link her to Teresa's death. Chrissy indicated that she wasn't concerned about it. and she had nothing to do with Teresa's death. And it was at that point she asked to speak with her attorney and didn't want to speak with me anymore.
In Matt Isbell's interrogation room, detectives get a very different response.
I think at that point Matt might have realized that this was a serious situation and he needed to do what he could to cooperate with us.
During the interview with Matt, he changed the story to he took Chrissy and Teresa to the nature preserve. At this point, Matt said that he let Chrissy and Teresa out of the vehicle, and Matt left the area. As Matt was driving away, he claimed that he saw a vehicle approaching the parking lot. A few minutes later, Matt returned back to the parking lot, and only Chrissy was there. Matt assumed that Teresa got a ride with the other vehicle, and they returned back to the hotel.
Noting inconsistencies in his story, detectives turn up the pressure and elicit a shocking confession.
Detective Fritz exited the interview room and approached me and the rest of the investigative team with kind of a blank look on his face, and he said, "Matt just told me that Chrissy stabbed her mom." It definitely there was a shock factor involved with what was being told to us. We definitely didn't expect, it all to be just laid out there for us, during one interview.
According to Matt, the night of July 1st, 2017 started out innocently enough. He and Chrissy were hanging out at her hotel room. But later that night, Teresa showed up, intoxicated and angry.
Chrissy was the reason that Teresa had gone back to prison. And I think Teresa resented that. Chrissy was prostituting herself. And Teresa was telling Chrissy, that infuriated Chrissy.
As it comes out, Chrissy was involved in a custody dispute with a former partner of hers.
Teresa was preparing to report her to DCFS for acting as an escort, which was going to prevent her from obtaining custody of her daughter in this long drawn-out custody dispute that she's been having.
In Chrissy's eyes, her only course of action was to murder Teresa, to stop her from doing that.
Matt explains to detectives that shortly after 2 a.m. on July 2nd, he, Chrissy, and Teresa left the hotel.
They were supposedly going to get alcohol. They had went down to McLean, Illinois to a truck stop and attempted to purchase alcohol. On the way back, they pulled into Funk's Grove. Chrissy had told Teresa she was looking for a cigarette and got out of the truck and said, "Help me look for a cigarette."
Teresa exited the vehicle and Chrissy exited the vehicle, and they started looking for a cigarette. And at this point, Chrissy grabs a crowbar out of the back of Matt's truck and strikes Teresa in the back of the head. Teresa turns and looks at Chrissy and says, "What the hell, Chrissy?"
It took Teresa by surprise, and Chrissy then attempted to, go behind Teresa and strangle her.
Chrissy puts Teresa in a chokehold and drags her to the ground until she stops moving. After Teresa's lifeless body is laying on the ground, Chrissy drags Teresa off into the woods. Chrissy, after a couple minutes, returns back to the truck where Matt's still seated, and Chrissy is carrying a knife and covered in blood at that point. And Matt assumes that Chrissy just stabbed Teresa.
Matt Isbell stuck to his story consistently, that he was the driver, but he was the witness in terms of what had happened and was not a participant.
With Matt skirting blame for the actual murder, can detectives be sure he's telling the truth? Coming up, detectives search for a linchpin.
We found a bloody t-shirt.
That's material.
And a murder plot is revealed.
There was a text message. In essence, tonight is a night I'm going to kill my mother.
July 7th, 2017. As Matthew Isbell spells out the details incriminating criminal evidence to nail down arrest warrants for the pair.
Matt was able to show us on a map where the crowbar was discarded on a bridge in the Peoria area, and we were able to send investigators to the area, and they were able to locate the crowbar and recover it. Matt had talked about the knife, but we were never able to locate it. We don't know where it was disposed of.
With evidence corroborating a large portion of Matt's statement, he and Christine Rausch were arrested for the murder of Teresa Paleman.
After the search of her property, including her purse, we found a bloody t-shirt that was described as being worn by Chrissy, by Matt.
Matt voluntarily drove his vehicle to the sheriff's office for his interview, provided us with consent to search and process the vehicle. There was blood evidence that was collected from various locations on the interior as well as the exterior of Matt Isbell's truck.
That did corroborate and was very much in line with what Matt told police.
That's material evidence that is used against both of them.
Matt's cooperation leads detectives to believe his claim that the murder was planned and carried out solely by Christine as an act of revenge on her mother.
His cooperative stance became critical. He's able to tell them things about what happened in the forest that night that only the killer would know. So he's really the kind of the secret weapon in the investigation and the one who turns it all around.
Matt just seemed to be blindly loyal to her to the point where he would come whenever summons and do whatever she asked him to do without question.
In an attempt to prove their theory of Chrissy's motive, detectives subpoena her phone records.
We were able to locate text messages where she stated that she and Teresa had gotten into a physical argument and Chrissy was not going to put up with it.
Detectives continue digging through Chrissy's messages and soon find exactly what they've been looking for.
There was a text message where Chrissy said to this third party, in essence, tonight is the night I'm going to kill my mother.
She also had communication in reference to not pulling the body as far back in the woods as she should have and having to go back and pull it in further.
When results come in on DNA collected at the crime scene, prosecutors are convinced they have enough to take both Chrissy and Matt to trial.
Evidence recovered from the scene, particularly the cigarette butt, once it was sent for DNA analysis, it was found to contain the DNA of Matt Isbell.
We have a confession from one of the people involved and seemingly all this evidence to support exactly what he's saying. It was a great moment for the entire investigative team.
On the day of her preliminary hearing, Christine makes a surprising move.
She unexpectedly entered a guilty plea with no parameters or no agreement that had been made with the state's attorney's office. So it definitely caught everybody off guard.
I'm not quite sure why she pled guilty. I think she felt like she was saving people from pain by pleading guilty.
At this point, Matt decides to plead guilty, and he secures a sentence of 12 years in prison. And that's a lighter sentence because he indeed helped investigators crack the case.
On January 31st, 2018, Christine Rausch is sentenced to 40 years in prison for first-degree murder.
40 years is going to be her entire life. She was 22 years old. She's not going to get out until she's 62 years old. Her daughter's going to be grown and have kids of her own before she ever comes out. Teresa was a good person. She didn't deserve to have happened to her what happened. As bad as she was troubled, I don't think she hurt Chrissy on purpose or wronged Chrissy on purpose or maliciously. She tried to do the best she could.
Mother is brutally murdered. Accusations fly.
There were many different scenarios going around.
Could the murder have something to do with her love life? As the investigation heats up, police wonder if they're dealing with a greedy killer or a sinister setup.
He recognized they had black shoes on, like a lot of the policemen wore.
I think that they were afraid of her, afraid of the information that she had.
At the center of this building media storm is a blonde bombshell no camera could resist.
Everyone thought she was a knockout.
The press portrayed her as this beautiful, perhaps conniving femme fatale.
When the gavel finally falls, it doesn't mark the end of this high-profile case.
They hatched a plan for her escape. The clock is ticking. Everybody's getting older, and the truth is out there.
May 28th, 1981, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's the dead of night at 2:15 a.m. when 11-year-old Sean Schultz is abruptly awoken from his sleep.
Sean feels a wired rope placed around his neck, and he sees an adult figure who then places around Sean's mouth and face a heavy, strong glove. Sean screams.
Sean's terrifying scream awakens his 7-year-old brother Shannon, who's also sleeping in the room in a separate bed. At that point, the person standing over Sean leaves the room, and Sean gets a brief glimpse of the intruder.
He heard his mother say, "No, don't do that," and then heard what sounded like a firecracker in the room.
Sean removes the rope from around his neck and races into the hallway with his younger brother and again catches a glimpse of the late-night intruder.
He sees the person at the foot of the stairs heading towards the back door. He immediately runs to his mother's bedroom.
As they reach their mother, 30-year-old Christine Schultz's door, a frightening scene awaits them.
She had a clothesline tied around her left hand. A bandana was tied over her face. She wasn't moving.
Sean and his brother barricade their mother's room and then call her boyfriend, Milwaukee police officer Stuart Honick, who just left the home hours earlier.
Stu called the Milwaukee Police Department, and he immediately rushed over.
Within minutes, Stewart and responding officers arrive at the scene. They're soon joined by another colleague, Christine's ex-husband, Detective Fred Schultz.
He ends up going to the scene.
When Fred learns about the shooting, he goes to the house. He wants to make sure his sons are all right.
Responding officers quickly make their way up to Christine's room.
He was face down on the bed, dressed in a t-shirt and underwear, but there was no sign of life.
She had a bullet hole in her back that was fired so close that she had burns around the wound.
Downstairs, young Sean Schultz tells police what he remembers about the assailant's appearance.
He thought it was a man. He described the appearance of the subject. Shoulders were supposedly broad, and he was wearing the mask.
But it's another detail that Sean remembers that has the potential to rock this investigation before it even begins.
He recognized the shoes, which were low-cut black shoes, similar to what police officers wore.
Responding officers immediately look to the two men at the scene, Christine's ex-husband, Detective Fred Schultz, and her current boyfriend, Officer Stuart Honick.
Police are wondering what is going on here. Could the murder have something to do with Christine's love life?
Christine Jean Pennings was born on November 15th, 1950 in Menominee, Michigan.
Christine was a very sweet, wonderful, kind person. She did grow up with a big family, so it was very important for her to be involved with all the family activities.
At 18, Christine married 19-year-old Alfred Fred Schultz. Shortly after, two became four, with the birth of their sons, Sean and Shannon.
Fred joined the Milwaukee Police Department, and he actually built the home that they lived in. Christine was a stay-at-home mom, Christine's sons were very important to her. They were very polite children.
While Christine kept the home fires burning, Fred worked his way up the ladder of the Milwaukee Police Department, eventually reaching the rank of detective. When he wasn't working, Fred was known to be the life of the party.
His nickname was Disco. He was a clubber. He liked to dance, that kind of thing.
But all that partying took its toll on the couple's 12-year marriage.
We did find out that he was having affairs on the side. And it just, after a while, you just don't want to deal.
In December, Fred met Lori Bembenek at a bar.
He was, at that time, a very good-looking guy. She was beautiful, stunningly beautiful. So there was an attraction.
Fred was about 10 years older than Lori. She completely fell head over heels for him and couldn't resist him.
It was very whirlwind. She was swept off her feet.
That ended up becoming a quick engagement.
Within 2 months of the divorce, Fred was starting a fresh chapter with his new bride, while his ex-wife Christine also found her own love interest.
Christine, in the meantime, was getting involved with an associate, Fred's, who had been a former good friend, Stu Honig.
Stuart Honig was a Milwaukee police officer. She started dating him, looking for a fresh start.
As Christine and Fred settled into their respective relationships, they worked together to care for their 2 sons.
They wanted to get through an amicable divorce.
But in the early morning hours of May 28, 1981, the discovery of Christine Schultz's dead body has rocked her loved ones.
I can't even imagine the trauma for those young boys.
As detectives arrive, they quickly have officers separate Christine's ex-husband, Detective Fred Schultz, and her boyfriend, Officer Stuart Honig.
Big question surrounding Albert Schultz and Stuart Honig is, could they possibly have had anything to do with this murder?
While Fred and Stuart wait outside, detectives focus on the crime scene.
When you look at the way Christine was left, she had a clothesline tied around her left hand, blue bandana was tied over her face. She had panties on, she had her t-shirt on. There wasn't any evidence that she'd been sexually assaulted.
Then you had the bullet wound. Christine Schultz had been shot in the back with a .38 caliber revolver. The bullet went through her heart and killed her. That was the cause of death.
She suffered that wound, turned out to be deadly very quickly.
Coming up, a trio of potential suspects rises to the surface.
He thought Stuart had crossed the line and betrayed him.
Here's Stuart. His alibi, if you will, was almost non-existent. It was extremely flimsy.
They had seen a jogger in the neighborhood several times, sometimes standing in...
Detectives investigating the cold-blooded murder of 30-year-old Christine Schultz have reason to believe that this was a targeted attack.
The intruder brought along the necessary tools. The rope, the glove that could be used to subdue, scare, intimidate the 2 boys, and bind and gag Christine Schultz.
Police search Christine's room for clues to the killer's identity.
The police went through the room, dusting it for fingerprints. They found nothing. Then, they found one potential clue.
Officers collected some hairs. There were hair from the bandana and a hair strand off of the leg of Christine. It looked like a strand from a wig, reddish hair.
As CSI continue collecting evidence, investigators turn back to the crime's surviving eyewitnesses, Christine's 11-year-old son, Sean Schultz, and his 7-year-old brother, Shannon.
He recognized they had black shoes on, like a lot of the policemen wore.
Sean Sean had to describe to authorities what he had witnessed that night. He told them he saw an assailant he thought to be an adult male wearing a green jacket.
Sean also noticed that the man who was leaving had reddish hair in a ponytail, and the ponytail was about 6 inches long.
Christine's younger son describes the person wearing a green jogging suit and carrying a gun. The description from Christine's sons leaves detectives wondering, could the assailant be one of their own? At the time, Christine was dating a Milwaukee police officer, Stuart Honick, but she had also been married to another detective, Fred Schultz, for over 10 years, so she was someone officers knew and liked. Her death was a shock. Investigators immediately moved to question the two men, starting with Christine's boyfriend, Officer Stuart Honick. Stuart tells investigators that he and Christine had spent the afternoon together working in her garden and having dinner. He says the last time he saw Christine was at 10 o'clock, but the last time the two spoke on the phone was at 11:20.
Stuart said he had fallen asleep. The next thing he remembered was waking up at 2:20 a.m. when Sean called him. He knew something was wrong, and he rushed over 2 blocks to Christine's house.
Stuart insists he and Christine had a good relationship, and he envisioned a future with her.
He claims that they were talking about wedding plans.
Detectives asked Stuart if he knew of anyone.
He's romantically involved with the victim. His alibi, if you will, was almost non-existent. It was extremely flimsy.
As investigators moved to speak with Christine's ex-husband, Detective Fred Schultz, his partner pulls them aside.
Michael Durfee had been Schultz's partner that night, and he tells detectives that earlier that evening, Schultz had been making negative comments about his divorce from Christine.
Fred was tasked with paying her alimony, child support, and also the mortgage on the house, which made him furious because he had built the house. About half of his police salary went into supporting her and supporting a house that he himself could not live in. Plus, he didn't have very much to do with children because Christine had full custody.
As far as motives go, Alfred Schultz had one of finances. And Stuart Honick, Alfred Schultz's good friend from the Milwaukee Police Department, is dating Christine Schultz. And that didn't sit well with Alfred Schultz. He became upset, he became angry, he was very jealous.
So here's the interesting thing. Fred Schultz, they find out, also had a key to Christine's property.
While the information creates an interesting lead, there is one problem.
Alfred Schultz had an alibi at the time. He was on duty along with fellow Milwaukee police officer Michael Durfee. Durfee also said that the two were investigating elsewhere.
Detectives ask Fred to come to the station for an interview, and they plan to follow up with Stuart afterwards. Meanwhile, officers fan out in search of other potential witnesses.
While the investigation is going on, other police officers canvass the neighborhood to ask neighbors if they've seen anything, and a number of them mentioned that they had seen a jogger in the neighborhood several times, sometimes standing in front of Christine's house.
Multiple neighbors had seen someone running in a green tracksuit. So police asked around, and apparently there's a man in the neighborhood who fits the description. When detectives track down and interview the man later that morning, he doesn't deny owning an outfit like the one Christine's children said was worn by the killer.
Christine's neighbor said that the night of the murder, someone had taken the revolver from his house and a green jogging suit.
Was the killer trying to frame Christine's neighbor? Detectives immediately start looking for evidence to back up.
We found out that he was lying about having a revolver. We believe that he had a soft spot for her and was an admirer of her. I suppose he wanted to get next to her with his story of the gun being stolen.
With the neighbor's story deemed as a desperate plea for attention, detectives find themselves at a dead end.
It was a made-up story. It just made the investigation more difficult.
coming up. An unexpected discovery exposes a calculated cover-up.
When I started doing a background on where he was during the course of the night, it started getting holes in it.
It was clear that he was lying about some things.
The story was falling apart.
Detectives investigating the murder of mother of two, Christine Schultz, are once again exploring the possibility that one of the two men in her life may be responsible for her death. Police officer Stuart Honeck or Detective Fred Schultz.
We have the man that she's involved with, and she has an ex-husband who's pretty angry about the fact that she has the house he built.
With suspicion surrounding both men, detectives take a closer look at each of them.
The detectives followed up on Stu. There wasn't any evidence that Stu Honeck had a motive, that he was angry or had any reason to kill Christine.
With Stuart Honeck seemingly cleared from the suspect list, detectives shift their focus back to Fred Schultz.
Fred Schultz's story is that he was investigating a burglary the night of the murder.
When I started doing a background on where he was during the course of the night, it started getting holes in it. The story was falling apart.
It was clear that he was lying about some things. It turned out that two other patrol officers had actually investigated that burglary.
Investigators confront Fred with their findings.
He said, well, actually, I was at such and such tavern, which is out of his district. He wasn't supposed to be there.
They were in a bar drinking, and they didn't want to tell the truth initially because they were afraid that it would come out that they may have been drinking while on duty.
So they sit down and ask Detective Schultz straight out, "Did you kill your ex-wife?" He says no.
He maintains his innocence so strongly that he agrees to take a polygraph test.
They typically use the polygraph, especially back in 1981, and he did pass.
But just before Fred is released, he makes an unexpected admission to detectives.
It turns out Fred Schultz had two guns. One was his service revolver. The other was his off-duty revolver, a .38 caliber, and the only other person that had access to that was his wife, Lori Bembenek.
Police now suspected Lori Bembenek may have had a role in this case.
Like Fred Schultz, Lori Bembenek was also from Milwaukee.
Lori and I met first time in grade school. We always were together, almost always together. We were just best friends.
Lori grew into a beautiful young woman. She was tall, had a beautiful smile, great style. Everyone thought she was a knockout.
In 1980, Lori felt a calling to public service.
Lori Bembenek's father was a police officer, so from a very young age, Lori wanted to become a police officer.
Other than adoring her father and following in his footsteps, I think she also wanted to make a difference in society with her life and help people.
But in August of 1980, shortly after she graduated from the police academy, Lori's dream came to an unexpected end.
There was an incident with marijuana at a concert at the Milwaukee Arena. She was with other people, and someone was busted and prosecuted for marijuana. She had to file a report as an off-duty police officer, and from what I know, what she told me is that she was let go and fired for filing a false report. I guess in my mind, she tried to not incriminate certain friends and wanted to be a friend in return, but kind of backfired, I guess.
For Lori, it was a devastating turn of events.
She was stunned. It was based on filing a false report. She thought it was a minor infraction.
After Lori was fired, she took a security guard position at Marquette University, and she taught physical fitness on the side.
Lori had also taken a 3-4 week job as a waitress at the Playboy Club in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where this nickname, Bambi, got associated with her.
While Lori struggled to stay afloat, she suspected her termination could be punishment for something else.
Before the concert, she was discovering that all the women and minorities were being discharged from the academy for, stupid things, real small incidences, and that Milwaukee Police Department was keeping the Title IX money they were entitled to in a lawsuit against the Milwaukee Police Department. She suspects that that's why she was turned in for the marijuana at the concert.
I think she stood up for things and spoke up in ways that maybe offended some people. But from what I know of Lori, it was for trying to do the right thing.
All of this was happening around the time Lori met Fred Schultz, and their whirlwind romance began.
The complicated past of Fred Schultz's 22-year-old wife is no secret to investigators.
She became a natural suspect that the authorities were interested in talking to.
When Lori was asked to account for her movements that evening, she and Fred were moving to a smaller apartment that was more affordable. So she and her mother spent till around 11:30 packing, and then she went to bed.
She just denied any knowledge. She had no knowledge of what occurred.
Lori had no animosity towards Christine. It was very amicable. Fred had some animosity because of the financial issues.
For the next 2 weeks, the case languishes.
Just a few short weeks after the murder of Christine Schultz, Lori Benbenek and Alfred Schultz move into a different apartment building.
But it's a development at their old complex that soon sparks investigators' interest.
On June 10, 1981, a woman called a plumber because her toilet was stopped up.
When the plumber gets there, he checks the drain lines and makes a strange discovery.
The plumber found a wig clogging the works.
The woman has no knowledge of where this wig came from, but she says maybe her former neighbors do.
The apartment that Lori and Fred were living in shared the plumbing with the apartment next door.
The police officers came, since the neighbors said there was some question of a wig being used in the murder of Christine, worn by the killer.
The plumber fished the wig out. By that time, there was police at the apartment, so the wig was grabbed as potential evidence. As it turned out, it was evidence.
It was a reddish-brown wig, and that was important for two reasons. Her sons had described the intruder as having hair of that same color, and police found one strand of synthetic hair of that color on Christine's leg.
Although the wig was suspicious, they still couldn't prove who flushed it down the toilet.
It's very to dig into Fred and Lori's background. Investigators learn the couple lived with a roommate named Judy Zess at their former apartment.
Judy Zess was a friend of Lori Benbenek. They had actually met while the two were at the Milwaukee Police Academy.
Detectives set up a meeting with Judy and her mother a few weeks after the murder.
Judy lived with Lori and Fred for a while, and she claimed that Lori owned some of the same items that were found at the crime scene.
She had seen a blue bandana, and she had seen a clothesline that was like the kind of rope that was used to bind Christine's hand.
Investigators ask her about one more detail.
She claimed that she had seen a green jogging suit that Lori owned.
But it's what Judy's mother says next that raises the final red flag for detectives.
The mother of Judy Zess said that she had overheard Lori say Christine should be blown away.
Benbenek was disturbed that a certain amount of her husband's money was going to her for the support of the children, and that irritated her to no end.
While money appears to be a strong motive for the murder, detectives are still lacking hard evidence to prove it.
On June 18th, Fred Schultz brought his off-duty weapon to be tested at the crime lab. It was in his possession, I believe, for 3 weeks before he actually turned it in.
This was actually the second time someone was supposed to have examined the weapon. Hours after Christine's death, Fred Schultz's supervisor asked his partner, Michael Durfee, to examine his off-duty revolver.
He made an assumption that the gun hadn't been fired because of dust around the barrel. It should have been confiscated right then and there, if nothing else to eliminate it. But for some reason, that wasn't done.
Ballistics find that that bullet in Christine Schultz matched Alfred Schultz's off-duty revolver.
Lori Bembenek was arrested at her job as security at Marquette University. Her locker was searched.
Detective spotted the hairbrush and snatched it. And said, "You mind if we check this out?" And she said, "No, go ahead."
The hair analyst made what we call a gross comparison, looking simply at appearance. Said that the appearance of the strands of the hair from that hairbrush matched with hair that had been found in the blue bandana that had been used on the night Christine was murdered.
Coming up, a shocking turn of events.
The whole thing.
The media blew it way out of proportion, and that's where the Playboy Bunny killer headlines came in.
It just made no sense. It was horrific.
On June 24th, 1981, 28 days since the murder of Christine Schultz, authorities have just arrested Detective Fred Schultz's young wife, Lori Bembenek, for the crime.
People speculated that Fred Schultz was somehow involved with the crime, but he was never charged.
Details of 22-year-old Lori Bembenek's arrest quickly make front-page news.
The TV stations sensationalized the whole thing.
The media blew it way out of proportion, and that's where the Playboy Bunny killer headlines came in.
The press portrayed Lori Bembenek as this beautiful, perhaps conniving femme fatale who had it out for Fred's ex-wife.
Lori's official trial begins in March of 1982.
The prosecutor thought Lori wanted Christine out of the picture, in part because that way her husband wouldn't have to pay all the support.
The state contended that Lori got the spare key to Christine's house, put on the jogging suit and wig, jogged to the house, committed the crime, and jogged back home without anyone seeing her.
Prosecutors say she went back home, changed clothes, put the gun where she found it, and was home when Fred called to tell her about the murder.
Things start falling together. She was the one that had access to the murder weapon. The wig, strands of it matched strands on the victim's body.
It would seem prosecutors have a mountain of evidence, but Lori's defense team reminds jurors it's just circumstantial.
Detective Michael Durfee initially said that Alfred Schultz's off-duty revolver was cold and dusty, giving the insinuation that it probably wasn't fired.
Lori's defense also reminds jurors that Michael initially lied about Fred's alibi.
The defense used this information to plant the seed of doubt in the minds of the jurors.
The next line of defense is the testimony of Christine Schultz's 11-year-old son, Sean.
He was rather vivid, you might say, in his description.
Jacket and had shoes similar to that of a police officer. He never changed his story, not even at trial.
The defense team also calls into question the wig found in Lori's old apartment.
This is 1981. There is no DNA testing in criminal procedure at that time. Lori's attorney tried to hammer home the fact that there wasn't that kind of science. And someone else might have put that wig down the toilet.
On March 5th, 1982, the one person that could sway the outcome of this trial takes the stand. 23-year-old Lori Bembenek.
When she got up and did her testimony, she denied everything.
For those present, Lori's testimony testimony leaves some expecting more.
News accounts of her on the stand portrayed her as cold and aloof, and that clearly hurt her case.
Lori was only 23. She was terrified. Many people may have misinterpreted her demeanor.
At the conclusion of the 2-week trial, a jury retires to deliberate Lori Bembenik's fate.
The jury deliberated for 4 days, and they did return a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. And Lori was given a life sentence.
She sat without movement, without emotion. I didn't see any tears. I saw nothing. She was stoic.
She tried her very best to tell the truth. She thought she didn't have anything to lose if she told the truth, and it all flipped on her.
Coming up, just as the case seemed shut, Lori has other ideas.
They hatched a plan for her escape, a quote-unquote window of opportunity.
This slogan rose up, "Run, Bambi, run."
It was just unbelievable. I kept thinking, this isn't real. This can't be real.
On March 9, 1982, 23-year-old Lori Bembenik was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of her husband's ex-wife, Christine Schultz.
After Lori was convicted, Fred Schultz divorced her, moved to Florida, and he would later tell people that he was convinced she was guilty.
Christine's boys were raised by family.
For the next 8 years, the former police officer is housed at the Tachita Correctional Facility in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
Lori filed several appeals. All of them were turned down.
She was sad and she was afraid because she was no friend of the authorities at the Milwaukee Police Department.
Lori had lost all 3 of her appeals and was getting very frustrated.
On July 15th, 1990, after 8 years behind bars, a new development occurs in Lori's case.
Bembenik spent 8 years in prison and then escaped.
It was on the news, and it was just unbelievable. I just kept thinking, this isn't real. This can't be real.
Police have reason to believe Lori isn't alone.
This is another very odd thing when somebody's convicted of murder and they're kind of infamous. And with someone like Lori Bembenik, who was beautiful, she had plenty of admirers, but she saw the brother of one of the women who was also serving in the same place. And she thought he was cute. His name was Dominic Gugliano. She flirted with him. He flirted back. When he came to see his sister, they spent time together and got engaged.
Unable to find Dominic, authorities pieced together how they believe he helped her escape.
In the laundry room, she saw a window that she thought she could get through. So she formed a plan with Dominic to help her escape. And he had prepared the getaway car and supplies.
A quote-unquote window of opportunity. She slipped through the window, crawled over the fence. She had a little jacket or something with it, threw it over the barbed wire.
She did cut her leg on the razor wire, but she was able to get through and ran to a waiting car, and he was there, and they were out of town in a matter of minutes.
She tried an appeal. She tried to do it the right way, and it was sort of discarded. It was like, I have to save my life. Nothing's working. That's supposed to work.
When Lori escaped, the residents of Wisconsin said if they saw her, they would not turn her in because they agreed, she did not get a fair trial and they were rooting for her.
One reason public sentiment shifted in Lori's favor is because her friend, Judy Zess, recanted her statements. Judy's testimony was important because she testified that she had seen the same bandana and jogging suit that Christine Schultz killer used in Lori's home prior to the murder.
For the next 3 months, the former Milwaukee police officer and her lover remain on the lam.
America's Most Wanted was a TV show that would talk about cases of fugitives.
She was working in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Following her arrest, Lori Bembenek applies for political asylum in Canada.
She claimed there was no chance she was ever going to get a fair trial.
On April 22nd, 1991, Lori is extradited back to the U.S. under the condition that the Milwaukee courts re-examine her case.
When they did get her back, she was in solitary for a year, but then through that year, these attorneys worked on her case.
Lori's team exposes 7 irregularities in the original investigation.
The ruling judge found no evidence of a conspiracy by prosecutors, but he had significant problems with the handling of the off-duty gun and the bullets. So prosecutors decided to cut a deal.
Lori was offered a deal that if she pleaded no contest to second-degree murder, they would give her credit for time already served, and then she would be on supervised parole, but she could go free.
In 97, Lori had been released, and I think to have a more peaceful life, moved to Vancouver. It was a new start for her.
In about 2004, I finally got the courage to ask her to marry me after everything she'd been through, and we got married in 2005. We were only married for 2 years and had an amicable divorce.
As time passes, Lori's team, headed up by defense attorney Mary Ware and PI Ira Robbins, uncover new evidence that casts further doubt over Lori's earlier conviction.
Mary Ware calls for a complete, thorough investigation of the evidence from the case, and now DNA gets involved. So the thought is, we're going to re-examine all of this? It was circumstantial to begin with. Maybe this will change the whole atmosphere surrounding this murder conviction.
DNA evidence, presence of male semen, that her defense team knew nothing about, didn't come out until now. Clearly the fix was in. They wanted Lori convicted, and that's what they got.
The DNA evidence uncovered the fact that Christine Schultz had had sex with someone before her death. And Lori's legal team found previously unrevealed evidence that showed the state crime lab had initially investigated it as a sexual assault case.
They found blood underneath Christine's fingernails, which would suggest that there was some type of physical struggle with the attacker.
We didn't have DNA back then, but they did have blood analysis, and a pretty sophisticated blood analysis. But they did not do that.
So put through a battery of forensic and ballistic tests.
Lori's had forensic experts test the gun and the bullet, and they found that there was no match from the off-duty gun to the bullet removed from Christine Schultz's body.
We end up with this chain of inconsistencies that calls into question the most damning evidence.
While Lori and her supporters are hopeful the new findings might clear her name, the emotional damage of the last 21 years takes its toll on Lori.
She wanted the Supreme Court to look at the new evidence so that she could withdraw the no contest plea to be entirely exonerated, but they declined to look at it.
In 2010, Lori Bembenek dies from kidney and liver failure, still fighting to clear her name.
Mary Weir, from what I know, is still working on things. I believe she has evidence now again that can clear her.
Hopefully someday justice will be done and her name will be cleared. But the clock is ticking. Everybody's getting older.
After 39 years, Lori Bembenek's arrest and conviction are still highly controversial.
We came up with enough physical evidence that we could arrest her. Everything eventually caught up with her.
Am absolutely certain, deep down in my heart, my soul, and every bone in my body, that she is innocent.
Hard-working single mom fighting to get ahead and to help others.
She would have done anything for anyone that asked. Always had a smile.
But when this mother of 5 disappears without a trace, her friends and family fear the worst.
We're all creatures of habit. So, pretty soon you start wondering if maybe there's something going on.
And I was like, oh no, what on earth could have happened?
As police begin a desperate search, a disturbing narrative begins to emerge.
There were family secrets involved.
She was going to get what she wanted, one or the other.
There were droplets of blood in and around the kitchen table. It went from a missing person to foul play.
This is someone who went absolutely crazy.
It's just a horror story.
June 3rd, 2014, Batesville, Arkansas. It's 3 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday when the second wave of nurses at Eagle Mountain Assisted Living Facility are due to begin their shift.
It's a variety of levels. They have assisted living, independent living, and there's also some nursing home care.
But as caregivers clock in, concerns begin to mount. 65-year-old nurse Linda Stingley has not shown up for her shift, and no one seems to know why.
Her coworker tried to reach her. She called her multiple times, even made a Facebook post asking if anyone knew where Linda Jo was.
I thought, well, maybe she just overslept, or maybe she had to go take care of something for her parents or something, that didn't have phone signal.
Others, knowing Linda's dedication to her job, sense something worse.
Miss Stingley never missed work, so they were close to her. They had apparently worked on that same shift for quite some time. Her co-workers were worried about her.
With fears mounting, Linda's co-workers contact the Independence County Sheriff's Office for help. Police agree to swing by Linda's home and conduct a welfare check.
They're just needing someone to be checked on. Just looking for someone in need of help actually in the residence or something to that effect.
As law enforcement officers make their way to Linda's home, news of her disappearance reaches her friends and family.
I was doing chores when my phone rang, and they told me if Linda didn't show up for work.
Your mind goes all over the place trying to think of what on earth could have happened.
Mrs. Stingley did not lead a life that takes risks that would put her in a position to statistically become a victim more than you or I.
To not call and to not show up was not typical behavior for a woman like Miss Stingley.
I kept thinking this has got to be a bad dream.
Linda Jo's mother tells police this is not something my daughter would have done. She would never walk off and not tell us where she's gone.
Oklahoma native Linda Jo was dedicated to faith and family above all else.
Yeah, go to church on Sunday, say grace before the meal, that kind of family values.
My daughter is friends with everybody. She didn't have anything much. If she saw somebody in need, she tried to help them.
She had a Bible with her at many occasions. Her family talked about her, telling them to just turn to the Bible and that anything needed to know would be there.
Married at 17, Linda and her husband, Billy Schaus, settled in her home state of Oklahoma and started a family.
Linda married him and had Michelle and Chris. We'd have family get-together. She was so fun-loving,
After 5 years of marriage, Linda and Billy divorced. But Linda had another chance at love when she met Jerrie Stingley. With her 2 children in tow, Linda and the kids made a new home with Jerrie. The happy couple embraced the idea of a growing family and quickly added 3 more kids to the brood.
She was working at the time when she met this guy, and I thought at first that everything would be okay. Linda married him, and then Gerald was born in 1972. Jerry was born in 73. Then Corey was born in May of 74.
But after 13 years, the couple's marriage ended in divorce, leaving Linda a single mother.
She had 5 kids and was really trying just to make it all work.
Faced with the daunting task of raising a large family on her own, Linda set out into the workforce to support her children.
She decided to go to school for nursing and was working as a single mom so hard to really achieve this education and have a better life for her family.
She was going to school. She would study all night. She was working at whatever she could find.
Hard work caring for the elderly.
She loved getting to go and be around the elderly people that were in nursing homes and everything. And she was working at assisted living place where she gave all the medicine and everything like that.
She's pretty devoted to it. She did love her job.
While Linda's oldest, Michelle, had already left the nest, her second daughter, Jerrie Lynn, was often called upon to help run the household.
Linda worked a lot of second shift at her job, and she would leave at 3 in the afternoon and would come home later in the evening or even close to 10 o'clock at night. So you would assume that a lot of things fell onto Jerrie.
As Linda's 4th child, Jerrie Lynn forged her own path from a young age.
She was just a normal child. She played basketball, was a very good basketball player and everything. But was very belligerent about, I'm going to do what I want to do, and you can't tell me what to do.
She was fun to be around. She just drove around town like everybody else did, nothing else to do.
She was a little bit of a tomboy, a little bit hot-headed. She talked back a lot.
As Jerrie grew older, she grew more independent, and her relationship with her family became more strained.
She was expected, I think, to kind of hold the fort down while Mom worked a lot. I do think that was an issue. Just from things I've seen while I was there, like Linda would ask her to do dishes or do this a lot, and there was a little bit of haggling, which, teenagers do that.
Jerrie Lynn really had some animosity and growing up, and some kids are just troubled kids, but she seemed to really have that my way or no way and some animosity toward her mom.
Right after she graduated high school, she has continued to get worse, and a lot of the time Linda did not even know where she was.
She wasn't a bad person or anything like that, but she did have a short fuse, as, like I had seen her get upset with people over very small things.
At the age of 19, Jerrie followed in her mother's footsteps by becoming a young parent.
Jerrie Lynn found out she was pregnant. She just quit her job. Her car was basically junk by then. I don't know what she would have done if Linda hadn't have took her in.
It soon became clear that she lacked some of the maternal instincts that Linda proudly displayed.
When she had that baby, within 6 weeks, you knew she wasn't okay. She would leave the baby with Linda. Even though Linda was working, she had to try to make arrangements. Jerrie just more or less abandoned him, left him with Linda.
Linda would do anything for her children. She always said, you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
While Linda worked hard to raise her grandson, the behavior of her own teenage son, Corey, became cause for concern.
The prosecutor's office and law enforcement were familiar with Corey Stingley. He had been in trouble.
Corey got on drugs before he ever graduated. He went into the National Guard, and I think Linda thought that would straighten him out.
Linda worked so hard, and then there was always another problem down the road. That's what it felt like. If this kid was getting it together, that kid wasn't.
Despite life's ups and downs, by 2014, Linda seemed content. Even her relationship with now 40-year-old Jerrie Lynn appeared to be on the mend.
Linda had said Jerry had made some bad decisions and that she hoped that she would do better.
Linda had worked so hard in her life and was finally getting to a point where she wasn't going to have to work anymore. Things were really looking good.
Linda was always very driven, loved her job, but it was coming toward retirement.
But when no one can reach Linda on June 3rd, 2014, panic sets in for those that love her.
As you could guess, I practically became hysterical. I kept saying, she's okay, they'll find her.
The next day, as officers make their way to Linda's home for a welfare check, dispatch collects all the information they can from her worried coworkers.
The last time her coworkers had seen Linda Jo, she was working a shift the day before, and she got in her car and left that evening. They hadn't heard from her since.
We're looking for the last person that probably saw her before she went missing. The search is on.
Coming up, police search Linda's home.
She was not in the house, but her car was still there.
Someone could have been walking the road and taken her.
As the hunt for Linda intensifies, a new search effort begins.
They could not get it together about why both of these were missing, and was there another person involved?
We may have someone, on the loose that is willing to very quickly injure and kill someone.
They kept going through my...
On June 4th, 2014, law enforcement in Independence County, Arkansas, performs a welfare check on 65-year-old Linda Stingley after she failed to arrive for her shift at a local assisted living facility the day before.
Family lived around here, lived close, and actually met deputies there at one point in time, and they actually let the deputies in the house and look around.
They looked for her. She was missing. She was not in the house, but her car was still there.
As police and family walk from room to room, everything appears normal.
No signs of a struggle at all. Nothing out of place. Nothing that would really raise any suspicions that was a crime scene.
But Linda's relatives do notice one thing that raises alarms.
Family members couldn't find her purse, so, we have Mrs. Stingley missing along with her purse. Someone could have been walking the road and pulling door handles on cars and driveways and taking her purse that way. However, in this case, Mrs. Stingley's also missing, so that kind of rules that out.
Linda Jo's purse missing is obviously concerning to police, but it doesn't really help them with a timeline. When she left her work that evening, did she get home and leave with her purse? It doesn't really give them a lot of answers.
Police speculate whether there may be an innocent explanation for Linda's disappearance.
Every day, a vast majority of those cases that are filed, those reports that were filed with adults, typically are non-founded. The people show up within a day or two because adults have their own lives that they don't necessarily share with everybody.
One would have said that a friend picked her up and they went out together, or one of her sons picked her up and they went out together. You look for the most innocent explanation first, and usually it is the most innocent explanation.
Linda was very widely liked, very widely respected, had children, grandchildren, and was basically your average, quiet, tax-paying.
Super, super sweet lady. She was very, very kind. Always very kind to me. I've never seen her be cross with anyone, ever.
With Mrs. Linda Stingley, that was the thing. What was initially kind of put everybody at ease, too, that she was okay, that she was going to show up, just because there was no one that would really be an enemy to her. There was no one that would be purposely out to get her.
As officers prepare to leave Linda's home, they're met by a concerned neighbor.
She had been keeping an eye on Linda Jo.
Broke into twice. The first time, they took her TV and stuff like that. They never did catch anybody on either one of them.
Of course, neighbors are going to be concerned about any break-in in their neighborhood, so she's kind of surveilling the house just as any good neighbor would do. She noticed a car parked behind Linda Jo's house.
The car was a maroon Pontiac Grand Prix.
It was spotted earlier by neighbors. They thought it was strange because it had been there the whole day before while Miss Stingley was at work.
And her neighbor was worried enough to say, that's a strange car in her driveway. I'm going to take down that license number.
So the sheriff's department runs the license plate number that the neighbor has given to them, and it goes back to one name. It's Jerrie Lynn Acklin.
After talking with Linda's neighbor, investigators return to the station and call Linda's mother, Jo Canada, to ask about Jerrie Lynn's car.
They told me about the neighbors seeing the car there, and I knew it was the color of Jerrie Lynn's car. It was far behind the house, which she never done.
According to Joe, Jerrie Lynn has been experiencing some recent difficulties, including having trouble finding a place to live.
It appeared that within the few days or weeks before this happened, she was really just staying with whoever she could find to stay with. It seemed like it was almost a one day at a time, one night at a time thing.
I just kind of got the feeling that she may have gotten into drugs. From her appearance, it did not appear that she was taking care of herself.
She stayed at her son Dalton's, and she set a fire in the closet there. And that's when he came up to our house, and he told me, he said, I don't know what's wrong with Mom, but something is.
You get the picture of Jerrie Acklin, who is somebody that's really out of options. She had really burned her bridges with almost everybody that she knew. She did not have a good relationship with family members, apparently, and she didn't have a game plan.
According to Joe, Linda did her best to help Jerrie Lynn get on the right track.
Linda told her, you need to get a job. I cannot take you in anymore. And she had come back the week before all this happened. And Linda talked to her again, and she said, I'm going to apply now, and I'll be back in touch with you.
She tells police that Linda, Joe, and
investigators obtain Jerrie Lynn's number and attempt to track her down.
She didn't answer. Nobody knew where she was or anything.
We can't get in touch with Jerrie. Family had tried contacting her as well.
With all of these little things, law enforcement and the family decided that this was not an innocent situation. They were missing and it needed some attention.
With less than 24 hours having passed since Linda was reported missing, authorities now fear her daughter, Jerrie Acklin, may also be in danger.
What initially spun everybody up to where it became a full response. Time is kind of against you at that point.
That was their fear, that both were missing and there was something that they couldn't piece together. They could not get it together about why both of these women were missing, and was there another person involved?
Unsure of the missing women's fate, police quickly leap into action.
There was a bolo be on the lookout for this particular car, the Red Grand Prix, Miss Acklin, and Miss Stingley.
As they await tips from the bolo, investigators continue interviewing Linda and Jerrie's loved ones, wondering who might have wanted to harm the mother and daughter.
The first thing we thought of was Corey, her son, and he had been released from prison right after Mother's Day before this happened.
The prosecutor's office and law enforcement were familiar with Corey Stingley. He had been in trouble down through the years. Law enforcement was wondering where Corey was. If there was a disappearance, could he be responsible for that?
Coming up, a new discovery casts a dark shadow on the investigation.
Someone was searching through the trash for these lottery tickets and found something.
That's kind of when all of our division, our criminal investigation division, kind of got involved very quickly.
And a trail of spending puts investigators on the chase.
They were starting to develop information that her bank account was being accessed by someone.
Her stuff was used here, check was cashed here, things aren't adding up.
been 24 hours since 65-year-old Linda Stingley was reported missing, and investigators in Independence County, Arkansas are desperate to find her.
She didn't show up to work, which was very out of character for her, and her work contacted some family, tried to make contact with her. Family went to the house. Her vehicle was there, but she wasn't home.
Now, they've also been missing.
We don't know how long Jerry's been gone. They're just trying to find her.
While a bolo for Linda and her daughter Jerrie spreads across the state, investigators are also interested in locating Linda's 38-year-old son, Corey Stingley.
Some family was helping us try to develop leads of what could have happened, and she did have a son that had very tedious relationships with named Corey. So that was the initial suspect at the very beginning.
Corey struggled to stay on the straight and narrow, having been in and out of prison for the past 20 years for various fraud and theft charges.
He was in prison for a while, then he was out. Then in probably 6 or 8 months, he was back in. And every time, Linda would do everything she could when he got out.
They immediately thought, because of his criminal history, that he must have some involvement, or that he was at least the first person that needed a look.
They bring him in for questioning. He's very open, very forthcoming about his relationship with his mother. They had a very tense past with each other, mostly because of his criminal history.
Police ask Corey where he was the day his mother vanished.
He had the best alibi you could have. He was actually incarcerated in another jurisdiction in their jail at the time.
So he was ruled out almost immediately.
As police contemplate their next move, they receive a call from Linda's mother, Jo Canada.
Jerrie Lynn called. She told me she was out of state. She said, I know Mom's missing. I'll see you in a while.
Jo tells police that, unfortunately, Linda Jo is not with her daughter, and then Jerrie Lynn says she has not heard from her mother either.
While Jerrie Lynn's phone call does bring some relief regarding her own safety, plenty of questions still remain.
When Jerry calls Joe, that automatically eliminates half of the mystery. We know that Jerry's alive. We know that there was not a double abduction in this scenario at all. But where is Linda?
She's still missing. They were holding out hope that she was with her daughter, and now it's getting even more grim.
On Wednesday, June 4th, 2 days since Linda was last seen by her coworkers, police received a major breakthrough in the case. Law enforcement 112 miles away in Bryant, Arkansas, report that a resident has stumbled onto something unsettling.
Apparently, there are people who look for unclaimed lottery tickets, and this person was searching through the trash for these lottery tickets and found...
Not only did they find it, they were actually nice enough to contact law enforcement right away and let them know, like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Why is this here in the trash can?
Any woman is still going to have their personal belongings with them. They're not going to just throw it away in a dumpster. So for an investigator, this is a really concerning turn.
That set up even more red flags to the authorities.
They just honed in right there, Penn said. We know she's missing, but we don't know if she's alive.
Hoping to uncover more clues, detectives head to Linda's bank and request access to her financial records.
Police want to know, have those credit cards been swiped anywhere, and by who?
They were able to determine through her banking information that either a debit card or a credit card had been used at a convenience store / gas station.
The debit card had been used about 30 miles from Linda's house.
2 checks had been written on Miss Stingley's account, and those were cashed. So they were starting to develop information during this period of time that her bank account was being accessed by someone.
Examining the locations of the transactions, investigators uncover a trail of fraud that starts near Linda's home and moves over 100 miles south through Arkansas.
They kind of had a trail all the way from Batesville down to Bryant, Arkansas. So we stopped off at all of those places to see if we could get any kind of video and what kind of evidence we could get there on the way down there.
They went to the owner or the manager of the store, of the gas station. Typically, they have surveillance both inside the store and in the parking lots. and they combed through that surveillance footage.
As police scroll through the footage, they hit pay dirt.
We could see that was Jerry's vehicle.
As police scrub the video, something else catches their eye.
On the surveillance video, they see a medium-build, dark-haired woman. They're able to get a close look at this person's face. Turns out it is Jerrie Lynn Acklin.
That was a victory moment. We're on to something here.
Authorities now have proof that Jerrie lied to her grandmother about where she was when Linda went missing.
We found video of Miss Acklin in her car getting gas at Ball Knob, and then going into a bank, and then also going through a drive-thru at another bank, cashing some checks for Mrs. Stingley.
So that was a good indication that they were on the right track.
I knew in my own mind that if they found Jerry Lynn, they would find out what happened to Linda.
Police focus on locating Jerrie Lynn, starting by taking a deeper look into her background.
They ran her information to the Arkansas Crime Information Center and found that she had felony warrants.
At some point prior to this, allegations were that she had forged a check or checks on one of her clients' accounts.
Well, now investigators are really starting to put the pieces together, and they're very concerned about where Jerrie Lynn is.
On the afternoon of June 4th, a patrol officer zeroes in on the suspect.
A trick for a lot of patrolmen that have been doing it for a while. It's work smarter, not harder. If you're looking for someone, go to your local Walmart and go to your local hotels. Drive through the parking lots and look for the vehicles.
Officers don't have to look for long.
A police officer with the Bryant Police Department was driving through the Walmart parking lot, found the car that matched the license plate and the description.
Coming up, detectives come face to face with their biggest lead in the case.
The patrolman that went up said, "Hey, you got a couple warrants for your arrest."
And details of Linda's disappearance send the investigation in an unexpected direction.
She come with another name of a suspect, a guy named Terry Stanley.
At some point, a fight broke out and he began beating his mother.
It's been nearly 36 hours since 65-year-old Linda Stingley was reported missing. After uncovering evidence that her daughter, Jerrie Lynn Acklin, has been using her credit card, police have just located Jerry's vehicle at a local Walmart.
The patrolman noticed that her vehicle was in the parking lot, that the license plate matched, and he just waited, at the end of the parking lot.
Moments later, Jerrie Lynn emerges from the store.
Went up, said, "Hey, you got a couple warrants for your arrest." Told her that she was also related to a bolo for her mother's disappearance.
Once Jerrie Lynn is transported to the Bryant Police Department, investigators waste no time questioning her about her mother's disappearance.
The first explanation was a non-explanation. I don't know anything about it.
It was denial. It was basically, I don't know where my mother is. I haven't seen her.
Hoping to elicit a truthful admission, detectives confront Jerrie with the evidence they have against her.
They started to reveal a little bit of information to her that they knew what was going on.
Finally, Jerrie Lynn fesses up, telling police everything.
At that point, she said, "I killed my mother, but someone else really did the killing."
She come with another name of a suspect that killed her mother together.
Police that she recently met Terry on a dating website and was taking him to meet Linda the night of June 2nd.
They went to Miss Stingley's house, and at some point when Jerrie Acklin and Terry and Miss Stingley were at the house, Terry initiated some kind of argument with Jerry's mother, and this fight broke out, and he began beating Jerry's mother.
And then as Miss Stingley was crawling towards her daughter, Miss Stingley was crying, "Help me," and then Mr. Stanley finished her off.
It's a horrific story that presents investigators with a frightening possibility.
We have someone on the loose that is willing to very quickly injure and kill someone for, a checkbook or a credit card or or whatever.
Investigators move quickly to bring Terry Stanley into custody.
He was located fairly quickly, brought in for questioning, and asked about Jerrie Acklin. Do you know her?
He, told us I'd just met this woman, on dating site, everything. We went on like one or two dates, something like that. We'd been texting back and forth and all this stuff, but other than that, I haven't seen her in a while.
When police inform Terry that he has been implicated in the murder of Jerrie Lynn's mother, he denies involvement.
He said, I'll tell you anything you want to know. You can search my phone, you can talk to my employer, here's where I've been, I can account for every minute.
Detectives take Terry up on his offer and begin to look into his whereabouts the night Linda was killed. It doesn't take long for them to determine that Jerrie Lynn still isn't telling the truth.
Essentially, they were able to determine through phone records, other means, that he was not with her when Jerrie Acklin tells us Miss Stingley was killed.
With Terry Stanley cleared, police turn back to Jerrie and pressure her to come clean.
At that point, she's ready to take responsibility for everything.
Jerrie Lynn tells police that it all started on June 2nd, when she and her mother got into a heated argument.
She had gone to her mother's house just looking for a place to stay, and her mother wouldn't let her stay there, and they got into it.
According to Jerrie Lynn, the argument between mother and daughter soon intensified.
From that point, it devolved into somewhat of a rant about her brothers and how her mother never did anything for her.
And that's when things escalated to the point to violence.
She says that she reaches under the table and gets...
They knocked Linda to the floor. Linda got up and slapped Jerrie in retaliation and apparently made Jerrie angrier.
It was a crime of passion. You don't just hit someone once. And if rage is involved, it's not just, I'm going to hit you once. She beat her mother and kept beating her, and she wouldn't die.
Jerrie tells investigators that her mother managed to somehow make her way from the living room into the kitchen, where Linda took her final breaths.
She was gurgling blood and trying to talk to her, and that ultimately she just did not want to see her mother suffer anymore. So she took a knife and stabbed her several times with the kitchen knife, which ultimately ended her life.
After listening to Jerrie Lynn's story, detectives are stunned.
I do not know why she felt like she needed to take her mom's life, but there was some anger issues there toward her mom, and I don't really know that it had to do with her place to stay. I think that sometimes those things just build and build and build.
Maybe she was just looking for money to buy drugs, and, maybe Linda wouldn't give them to her. You try to grasp for straws. You look for some reason that somebody does something like that.
How does Jerrie Lynn live with that picture in her mind? And it's a picture that's in my mind of her being beaten to death. It's just something that I cannot get through.
We're trying to rationalize what may be a rational thought, and it's really impossible to do.
Coming up, a twisted case comes to a devastating close.
She took law enforcement officers all the way to the spot to recover the body.
It was wrapped in a blanket and then just left there.
That began the nightmare that's been my life.
After a shocking confession, investigators now know that 40-year-old Jerrie Lynn Acklin is responsible for the murder of her own mother, 65-year-old Linda Stingley.
Jerrie beat her mother to the point that she kind of snapped to for a second and realized there's no way to fix this. So what does she do? She goes and gets a knife and stabs her,
Police know how the murder occurred. They still haven't found Linda's body.
Jerrie Acklin tells us, my mother's dead. The murder occurred in Independence County. The body is in the Malvern area.
Following Jerry's directions, police begin the grim search.
It was just a short distance off of the road back into the woods is where her mother's body was dumped. It was wrapped in a blanket and then just left there.
This was Arkansas in the summertime. It's hot and humid, and it was not good. Decomposition had already started.
With the recovery of Linda's body, Jerrie Lynn is officially charged with murder.
Around midnight that night, I was told my daughter was dead, and they had Jerrie Lynn in custody. That began the nightmare that's been my life.
Linda was always there for her children. I just can't imagine that Jerry would turn on her that way, to actually take her life.
With Jerrie Lynn in jail, police prepare for her trial by collecting additional evidence.
We actually found Mrs. Stingley's purse in Jerrie Acklin's car when we served the search warrant on it. As we dug a little bit more, there was a OEM Pontiac scissor jack. That was very obvious that, just as Acklin had described in her interview, that she used a tire jack to beat her mother until she stopped breathing, because it was absolutely covered in blood and hair.
Next, police obtain a search warrant for a thorough sweep of Linda's home.
They were able to determine that there had been a lot of blood that had been cleaned up. There was, while not immediately visible, what was visible was like underneath chairs and things in the kitchen.
They started to see blood spatter and that sort of thing, and then they looked into the dryer, and there was blood in the dryer. They were able to verify that that was a crime scene.
It's pretty grim as far as the particulars of the murder. And then as we start investigating these crime scenes and serving the search warrants, we kind of find, just how grim it actually is.
With an overwhelming amount of evidence against her, Jerrie Lynn and her lawyers agree to a plea deal with the state.
The offer that was accepted was a term of 30 years on murder in the first degree, followed by 20 years on residential burglary, followed by 6 years on theft of property. So these sentences were all to run consecutively with each other, which means one right after the other. And that was a plea that the family could live with, and one that we ultimately entered.
On April 28, 2015, Jerrie Lynn devastated family waits, hoping to learn the reasons behind the heinous act.
When Jerrie Lynn came into the courtroom, the judge said to Jerrie Lynn, he said, "Would you like to make a statement?" And she said, "No." And I remember feeling just like we will never, ever have a statement from Jerrie Lynn. That she doesn't even have the courage to turn around and look at her family.
What I'd like to say to Jerrie Lynn, if you would look us all in the eye and tell us why you did this to the person that gave birth to you, went through hell to raise you, and then you do this, maybe we might have a little closure.
Instead, Joe Canada is left picking up the pieces of her shattered family.
That would be, a horrific thing to have to deal with for your granddaughter to kill your daughter. That has to be something she's having to live with every day.
I go to her grave often and talk to her, say, "I know you're okay now, and I'll see you one day, but oh, how I miss you now. How I wish I could hug her like I always did."